of everything. Like if you're not feeling it, you can take a few days off. People have taken months off, they'll come back, but you always like.
Would you consider a writer? Yes, dude. And yes, I don't want people to. Guys, as a class, I would be considered a social parasite. As a class, I don't defend my class. My class are a bunch of scumbags. I don't defend my class. I have no right to exist as a class. I do this for the content, not the form of the class, but what I'm actually doing. So I'm doing this shit. I'm streaming because I have a message I want to get out there, for example. I don't believe in this as a class. I don't believe there should just be people that are paid to do what I'm doing, just regardless of the content. That would be defending my class interest. I'm not defending my class interest. I'm just defending what I'm doing concretely. So no, that's not the same as like, guys, you know, I would own if I could own a fucking factory, I would. If I could own a fucking sweatshop, I would. I don't give a fuck. I would make money anyway.
Are software engineers part of the working class?
No, they're not. And that's okay, because I'm sick of people who want to LARP as the revolutionary class. Just because you are not part of the working class. I mean, it's just so childish, because it's like you read the Communist Manifesto and it's like and it's like, oh, they're really gassing up the workers. I want to be part of that class that they're gassing up. And it's like this infant desire for recognition and no, that's not what's going on. You're just confusing class analysis with ego and recognition and the desire to be liked and praised, and that's something you should sort out on Tinder or something, not using Marxism. So I can confidently say, as a class, I would be a social parasite. So what? That has nothing to do with you should not you shouldn't stop turning class into an identity, because that's no different than furries. That's what furries do. Furries just have this fantasy identity that they just want to identify with, and it's attached to their ego and sense of self. That's not what classes are, okay?
Based.
What class are software engineers part of?
The professional managerials, roughly speaking, the professional managerials. Yeah, it's PMCs get so offended that they're not part of the working class, and it's dude, you're giving yourself away. Marxism is not literally about you, dude. It's not about you. When we're talking about classes, we're not literally talking about individuals. We are talking about the expression of definite interests, contradictory interests, through different mediums and through different means. So, for example, class distinction is discernible at the level of the differing class interests.
I don't manage anything in my job. How am I PMC?
At a social level. You're not a manager, but you're a professional. That's why. It's because you're a professional. It's a profession. You need to understand that Marx has an extremely particular understanding of the significance of the proletarian class. Most of the young people where I live can't get a job. They are not. No, guys, trust your fucking instincts. Just trust your instincts.
Based.
The labor theory of value is trash and outdated.
Okay, that's fine. But, when most people talk about the working class, they're not thinking of engineers. They're not talking about software engineers. They're not talking about coders. And that's common sense. You can just rely on common sense and it'll probably be correct. I just have a problem when people overreach and they're like, oh, don't forget grad students. Grad students are also working class. Prostitutes are also working class. Don't forget them. And it's no, you are overextending a very narrow interpretation of theory you don't even understand in the first place to stretch something that isn't true, even on a very visceral, common sense level, in the name of some poorly contrived dogma. and it's just a cope, right? It's just a fucking cope. It's like when people are like, OnlyFans is like a model for emancipation because we own our own means of production. I own my pussy and can take pictures of it. That's the same thing as socialism. Like, no, you're coping. You're just coping. Okay? It's just not the case. So it's that simple. Also, you know, I'm sick of people taking Marxism personally. That's not something you should take personally. Don't take Marxism personally. It's a science. But Hans, you're a streamer. Are you claiming you're working class? No, you stupid fuck. Because I don't get my fucking validation from individually identifying with a literal social class. That is psychotic. That is fucking stupid. You're a furry. You don't even know what class it is. You don't even know what it's referring to. You make it like seem like it's this fucking identity that's gonna give you some social capital discursively or something.
When I automate the working class, you won't have anything left to complain about and Marx will be irrelevant. What will Marxists complain about then?
Coding. If you notice something, we have automated already a lot, and we still have an 8-hour workday. So go ahead and explain that one. I'm not against automating everything. It's just not going to happen under capitalism. I wish it would happen, because no one would have to work. Anyway. There's also some things that cannot be automated. You know, the buck stops somewhere, 100%. What I'm trying to say, though, is that, you know, when you try and get your validation from individually identifying with the social class, you're going to do it like Dust James does, or what Yankee Tanky does, and be like, I am literally the working class. And you're using it as a form of social capital to have a discursive edge over other people. So, like, let's say you're in an argument with someone. You could just basically be like, oh, but I'm a worker, so my argument's somehow more credible than yours or more valid than yours. Yeah, at that point, you're not actually talking about any real class. You're talking about a form of social capital for discourse. You're not actually relating to your actual class in any kind of fucking way. I think people are really confused about how class works, because class is a distinction within the way in which we are universally interpolated by a universal state. Class is an immanent distinction to that interpolation. It is also a distinction relative to the relationship we have to production and to the mode of production. Production of things that we use to subsist. And the conditions of subsistence are relative across societies. We're not just talking about human survival. So there are these different relationships people have to the way society reproduces itself. That's basically all class is talking about. And the only time class has a normative significance, like this class is bad and that class is good, it's not really what we're talking about. We're talking about a conflict that is at the level of some common social reality. Oftentimes politics, right? Politics is the most common one. It's also culture, right? I mean, what was the Cultural Revolution in China about, right? But it's mainly politics that you're going to see the relevance of class rear its head in, right? That is not an individual thing. Nobody can just be the working class. There are working class interests that are articulated through common signifiers. So it's like class is only going to have normative significance at the level of common social signifiers. It is not going to have relevance at a personal experiential level unless you can somehow articulate that in a way that can again become a common social signifier. So let's say you grew up as a working class guy from a small town in Ohio and you wrote a novel. Well, your working class background might reflect in that novel or your music or whatever, but that's because it's going to transform from a personal experience into a common set of social signifiers that are discernible on a common level. But in terms of your like immediate individuality, your class has no fucking relevance at all. It has no fucking relevance whatsoever. None. Zero. Nil. Nihil. None. No relevance at all. A lot of people have a really hard time understanding that. They think class has a like very normative significance as far as judging the credibility of individuals. So if someone owns a factory, you're a bad person. And whereas if someone's a worker, you're a good person. Well, oftentimes people who are workers are rapists, and oftentimes people who are owners of factories are saints. So it's like you can't use it as a criteria for judging individuals on a normative level. There's nothing about being working class that's going to make you a good person. Nothing. Plenty of working class people are really bad fucking people. Morally. So it's not a normative thing. Right? Watch them take me out of context. They're saying workers are bad and they're rapists. No, I'm not. I'm saying there's plenty of working class people that are not good people. So just because someone is working class doesn't mean they're normatively, to be judged as good people. That's fucking stupid, right? You should judge people's credibility on the basis of like, I don't know, what they've actually fucking done. If you're going to judge people on an individual level, judge them on the basis and merit of what they've done individually. Don't fucking judge them on the basis of their class. Now, maybe if someone is like an artist and their art is clearly, very clearly, unable to go beyond the narrow, and what Lenin would say, Philistine consciousness of the ruling class, you can critique them. You can say this person's a fucking idiot. They have no way of seeing the bigger picture because they're stuck within their own narrow class view. And that's why their art is dog shit. You can say something like that, sure. Yeah, you do not have to be working class to serve the working class. There are almost like 0 major leaders in the history of Marxism that were actually from the proletariat. Lenin was not a proletarian. He had no proletarian background. Marx didn't. Engels didn't. So where does this fucking normative bullshit come from? I don't get it. Yeah, Che Guevara was a rich kid. So was Fidel. Where does this fucking dumb... Stalin, allegedly his father was actually a worker. Cobbler. That's what they say. But Stalin was a priest. He was training in a seminary school.